Well, the first round of the election cycle is over, and boy, was there news in that. Israel is on fire, and a legendary coat drive is starting up again. We've got two coups, Pat Shingleton, and the High Sheriff. Roll it, Scott. Well, last weekend was something. The election cycle has gotten started, and we're going to get into that even heavier with analysis with John Couvion with JMC Analytics. But first, the High Sheriff is here. Sid Gautreaux won an election again last Saturday without a runoff. 86% of the vote, and the man is mad he didn't get to 90%. What's going on, Sheriff? How you doing, my friend?
I'm doing great, my brother.
So let's talk about it. This is quite the endorsement by the people of East Baton Rouge Parish.
Well, Clay, I'm very humbled by it, and I'm blessed. And yeah, I know it was, and you know, it's a tribute not to just me. I mean, it's all the people, men and women that work in the sheriff's office. We got some wonderful men and women that work in the sheriff's office.
Since you have taken over office, there have been so many aspects of law enforcement from the sheriff's office that have been different. Yes, you have been very focused on enforcement. Yes, getting bad actors off the street. Yes, going into neighborhoods and making certain people know that law enforcement is there. But you balance that with an investment in people, particularly young people. And when you started doing that, that was really new to this part of the state. Why is that such a driving factor for you?
Well, I learned it early on, you know, when I was chief of police in Baker, and I was there 27 years. Mm-hmm. And I realized, I've known this since I pinned a badge on the first time, we're in the people business.
Yeah.
You know, and you can't be there today and gone tomorrow. You got to be there every day, and not just in an enforcement role, like you said. That's very important, but you got to do as much or even more with community outreach. Mm-hmm. And that's why we started the community policing unit, and that's why we started bike patrol and all the things we do, because the public, if we're not out there with them on as much as we can on a daily basis, doing those kind of things, talking to them and seeing what their problems really are, then, you know, sometimes we go in an area and we think this is what the people want us to do here, but when you get to talking to them, that's not as high on their wish list as some of the other things. So, you know, it's just, you know, and it's all it is. It's just treating people the way you'd want to be treated, and listening to the people that you serve and what their needs are, and implementing it. Because as law enforcement, that's all we do. You know, we serve. And I tell all these young people we hire, I hope you're here for the right reason, and the right reason is to serve. That's all we do. We don't manufacture some good or sell some commodity or whatever. We provide a service. And the ones that have the true servant heart and the true servant mentality, they do well in this profession.
In your time in law enforcement, what has been the biggest thing you've learned? I mean, having been, you've been an executive over agencies for a long time, the Baker Police Department and now the East Baton Rouge Parish Sheriff's Office. What's the biggest thing you've learned?
Well, no matter what you're dealing with and no matter what's in front of you at that time, you know, you've got to look at it from its totality and then do the right thing. And you make your decisions. And when you make that decision, you have to know. And when I first started, got my feelings hurt real easy. But I've learned that you're not going to please everybody. And you know, there's some people that are never going to be happy with what's going on. But you always keep it forefront in your mind that here are the people you're serving, and do the right thing. And that's the biggest thing. And I try to keep my focus and my compass right there where it should be. And I've done that, and I'm blessed with it. And I'm at this point in my life, I'm not going to change.
People talk so much about crime nowadays here. I mean, it's the #1 topic that comes up, as you know, almost over everything else. It's even supplanted traffic as the #1 thing we complain about, and we can talk about traffic. What is your opinion now of the nature of violent crime in our parish?
Well, it's totally out of hand. You know, I know everybody wants to tout statistics.
Give me another minute in here too, Kyle.
I know people want to tout statistics, And statistics are a good gauge of where you're going, but the one statistic that matters to me is how you actually feel as a citizen. If you don't feel safe, I want to correct that. And you know, we got a lot of people out there that no matter where that crime stat is, they don't feel safe. And until we try to get those people in a frame of mind that, yeah, I do feel safe. I know they're here to help me, but it's trying to change that perspective in law enforcement.
I want to ask this question in the last minute we have. What's your plan for this next term? I know you've got some changes coming. At the top of your to-do list is what?
We met yesterday, in fact, with the staff, and we looked at all of our past accomplishments, and we looked at the long-term goals and said, where are we with those? And we've been fortunate to accomplish most of them, but over the next 4 years, I want to try to do something with the prison and, you know, do what we can there and, you know, continue our services and try to improve on our services, and that's what we're going to do. And the one other thing that's real big on my calendar is trying to get you to buy me some sea bass.
You beat me to it. I was saving that.
You were.
Listen, man, it's been 4 years you've been avoiding me on this sea bass. We both enjoy sea bass at a certain establishment here in town, and every time we talk about doing it, he's busy that day. What's going on? Well, you won the election now. Can we finally go and have lunch?
Hey, and it's my treat. It's my treat.
Got that on camera. Let's make sure we have that. We're putting it on social media. Love you, brother.
That's right. Love
the
you
High
too.
Sheriff Sid Gautreaux, winning again, very much an asset to our community, and I'm proud to call him friend. Let's take a deeper dive into these elections next with John Kuvion, and then what's happening in Israel is just mind-boggling. Colonel David Kuvion has perspective on that, and then Pat Shingleton, Pat Votes for Kids. Man, that's so wonderful.
That's a great program.
He's here to talk about it. Back in just a moment. All right, so the first leg of the election cycle has now ended, and we've got some people who won without a runoff. John Kuvion with JMC Analytics is here, recapping what we said last week. Pretty much everything we said last week played out the way we thought it would, with one exception. We both believed that Jeff Landry would get into a runoff with Sean Wilson. Wilson would be the second vote getter, and that Landry would likely win in the runoff. Yes. You said, based upon analysis, that it was about a 20% chance that he could do it without a runoff. And then when you dig into the numbers after the election night was over, you saw how poorly the other candidates performed, particularly Sean Wilson and Stephen Waguespack. Wags didn't get to 10%, and Wilson didn't get to 29 or 30%. What did the numbers show you?
The numbers showed that the election results were an unrivaled failure for the Democratic Party, or should I say abysmal. More specifically, the number that stuck out most to me was, I was looking at the black vote. The same precincts that gave John Bel Edwards 90% of the vote in the 2019 primary, and notice I'm saying primary, not runoff, because of course he was forced into runoff.
Right.
The same precincts that gave John Bel Edwards 9% of the vote in the primary gave Sean Wilson 70%.
Wow.
And Jeff Landry 12%.
Wow.
But to make it even more abysmal for the Democrats, so Sean Wilson got 70% of the black vote statewide according to my estimates, well, precinct data.
What's that number again?
70. But where it gets interesting, there was a big dichotomy between rural blacks and urban blacks. More specifically in Northeast Louisiana / the 5th Congressional District, Jeff Landry got near 20% of the black vote. Sean only got 60.
You know,
so in other words, low turnout to me is a very convenient excuse, but it obscures the fact that Democrats, in my opinion, took the black vote for granted, number one, which is part of the low turnout, which I saw in my polling as far back as June.
Yeah.
Number two, getting 12%, and by the way, there's more black votes that went to other candidates, John Schroeder, Stephen Waguespack, Hunter Lundy, et cetera, et cetera. So to me, Sean Wilson really needs to do some honest soul searching as to, was my cerebral approach really appropriate in terms of getting the base out?
Well, there was a couple things that we're speaking candidly about this. There was a feeling of inevitability that Landry was going to win anyway, and I think that had an impact on whether people would support him or give their vote to another candidate that they may have assumed would have given Landry more of a challenge.
Right.
It also didn't hurt Jeff Landry that both Grambling and Southern had their homecomings on Election Day.
Which is true, but the way I look at that is if you really wanted to vote, you do have a whole week of early voting, number one, and you have the ability to mail-in vote if you meet the criteria. So in other words, it's not like you had a one-and-done kind of situation. if a person truly wanted to vote, he or she had plenty of opportunities to do so. I think it was a case of, number one, Sean Wilson was an uninspiring candidate. Number two, as much as Democrats complain about this, the reality is Jeff Landry, in my opinion, made an honest play for the black vote, not just showing the crime ads, but some Democrats were complaining, well, he did digital ads. Well, that's politics 101.
He did digital. He bought urban radio. He ran an ad with an African-American male that wasn't some cheesy ad from the 60s. And he did make the effort to do that. Let's go down ballot a little bit. The lieutenant governor's race, you and I both saw that as, Billy Nungesser winning that, and I wasn't surprised.
Right, but it was such a strong landslide that not only did Billy get about 30% of the black vote, according to my estimates, but in the 2nd congressional district that Troy Carter holds, which gave Joe Biden 76% of the vote, do you know that Republicans got 50.1% of the vote there? Billy was 2 points away from carrying Troy Carter's district. That's how abysmal the numbers were for the Democrats.
Okay, we got a minute left. Down the ballot, Liz Murrill, is she the next Attorney General?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, what about Secretary of State?
Really, Liz Murrill and Nancy Landry, who, by the way, benefits from being a Landry, and John Fleming, in my opinion, they're probably going to get close to the same share of the vote. Right now, I'm thinking 60.
Okay. What do you think the turnout in 30 seconds is going to be for?
25 to 30.
25 to 30. Because there's nothing really, quote unquote, sexy on the ballot.
Correct. Secretary of State's at the top of the ballot, and that's hardly a turnout generator.
So let's do this right before we get to that. We'll come back and talk about this again. Sure. And then I'd love to pick your brain about parish politics, because next year is going to be something else.
It'll be interesting.
All right, so coming up, let's dig into what's been happening in Israel now with a really good friend and someone with real perspective on geopolitics. Colonel David Kuvion is on set with us next. And later on, Pat's Coats for Kids. We'll talk about it with Pat James. So as many of you have been watching at the top of national news for maybe the last month, it's the conflict in Israel that has been going on that involves Hamas and what's happening in Israel, but also now in the last couple of weeks, Hezbollah, which is funded by Iran, has been a part of what has been a very bloody exchange there in Israel. And I wanted to get Colonel David Kuvion's perspective, retired U.S. Marines, and was very involved in Iraq after 9/11 and including the recent aftermath of the fall of Baghdad. What is your perspective on this?
Well, I want to make a real quick point. You said Hezbollah was funded by Iran. Hamas is also funded by Iran, as well as Islamic Jihad, ISIS, and there's a new Iraqi fundamentalist group that is moving into the area as well. And this is really all coordinated by Iran.
Why?
Their stated goal has
wipe
been
Israel
and
off the map.
continues
Yeah.
to be to wipe Israel off the map.
Correct.
And however they're going to do that, Hamas is Sunni, and Iran is Shia.
Yeah.
But the enemy of my enemy is my friend, and they are coordinating with this, and they're coordinating with things. Once Hamas attacked Israel, Iran called, and Hamas called for all other Arab nations and organizations to jump in with them and bring the fight to Israel. So this could erupt into a global area.
Yeah.
But it is primarily focused on taking Israel off the map, and they have the coordination they have done has been fabulous. The information propaganda that they've put out has been fabulous. They have really got people who see Israel as the enemy in the Islamic fundamentalist world worked up over this. And this is not going to be a short-term thing. This is going to take a while.
It's one of the most horrible things to watch. There was an official with Hamas who was on Russian television who boasted a couple of weeks ago and said, we've been planning this for 2 years, that while they thought we were just governing,
correct,
we were planning this attack, we were building towards this war. And then you see the nature of some of these attacks, bombing hospitals and public centers where families are. For me, now you give me your perspective on this because you've got the history there and the the credibility, I would think that that would gin up more support against you because you're not attacking military operatives. You're not going after military areas. You're attacking public centers, which will likely draw more sympathy and involvement from other countries outside of your partnerships there. Am I wrong?
You're making a fundamental mistake
Okay.
in thinking that other people think and act like you do.
Okay.
And have the same values as you do. They
Okay.
don't.
Okay.
They're different. War means fighting, fighting means killing. And that's what they're going to do. This is war. And they are bringing wholesale war. General Sherman marching through Georgia.
Yeah.
They are going to wipe out, and that's what they're going to try to do. Now, conversely, Israel is going to probably take the same method coming back.
Yeah.
And it is going to be total war.
Is that why the president is urging Israel to abide by the quote unquote rules of engagement?
Yes, they are doing that. And I personally, I've always had a problem with rules of engagement. If you're going to fight a war, you fight a war to win. You don't fight a war to be kind to the other side.
Yeah.
You're not going to do that. You're going to think. And again, remember the stated purpose is to wipe out Israel. Israel is not going to stand for that.
No.
They will fight back with everything they have.
Yep.
They will not give up. The image of Masada,
Yeah.
are you familiar?
Yeah.
The image of Masada stands,
Yeah.
and the men and women of Israel Fighting Forces will live up to that oath that they take, that they will never give up.
Okay, I've got a minute left. I'm going to ask, how much time do we have?
Well, almost 30 seconds.
Okay, all right, quickly here. Will this require our involvement?
It's going to require involvement as much as arms and ammunition will be.
But no
And
boots on the ground.
I don't think so. That's not to say we've done that before, that
Yeah.
we said we're not going to be boots on the ground, and
Yeah.
we have.
Yeah.
The humanitarian issue is a different thing.
Okay.
But even getting into the humanitarian issue, you make yourself a target for the other side to draw you into the war.
I want to, it could be as soon as next week, but I want to get you back because there's more about this that I want to be able to talk about because more and more people are concerned.
Again, it's not going away.
Wow. All right, Colonel David Couvillon, we will try to get him back as soon as maybe next week to talk with us about this. Up next, Pat's Coats for Kids is a legendary thing that we're a part of. Pat Shingleton is here to talk about that next. So I'm just hoping the best material wasn't wasted during commercial break. Legendary
You need to
forecaster.
stop talking about my wife.
No. You see what he does? Pat Shingleton is here. Pat's Coats for Kids, 35 years.
Yeah, 35.
It's one of the longest drives or fundraisers of its kind in the history of the city of Baton Rouge, or is it the longest?
I don't know. I think we're up there somewhere.
Yeah.
But I don't really look at it that way. I just look at it from the fact that, hey, somebody asked me to do it, and here we are.
Well, longevity, how did it start?
Interesting story. Clay, anything that I've done, somebody has asked me to do it.
Right?
Redfield Bryan, Father Mike Maroney said, why don't you help us with the pharmacy at St. Vincent de Paul? Fill a prescription for the needy. I come back from Pittsburgh. They said, hey, get out and cover this St. Patrick's Day parade downtown. So I get downtown, and this is when Pat Screen was mayor, and I said to Rochelle McCann, I said, I see the parades lining up. She says, no, this is it. It was a horse-drawn carriage and a convertible. So they said, do something with that. Well, my brother-in-law, Frank Keene, my favorite brother-in-law, because he's the only brother-in-law, my favorite brother-in-law was attending it was called Varsity. It was all the dry cleaners in the country come together to kind of compare notes to see how they would improve their business. And a gentleman in Houston, Texas, decided to get used coats, clean them, and distribute them. Mm-hmm. So Mabin, my wife, was handling the advertising for Keene's, and she said, do you want to do this? And I said, sure. She took it to Channel 9, and they kind of balked at it. Then she brought it over to John Spain, and John said he's going to do it. So it was the ask. Mm-hmm. But there again, the message is pretty succinct there. Yep. You know, I mean, You saw what we experienced last February with those days where we
Yeah.
didn't get above 31 degrees. So that's how it all started.
How many coats have you given out? Do you have a number over the years?
Oh, they're saying somewhere in there close to 1 million.
Next to a million
Yeah.
coats. And you know, some might have assumed when you retired that this would go away, and I was very happy
Yeah.
to hear that you were going to keep doing it. Why'd you make that decision?
I think that it's the relationship with WBRZ, as you've experienced. It's a powerhouse when it comes to being able to advance a message. Manship family's been extremely good to me.
Yep.
Everybody I've worked for here has been supportive. So you have it down to where you're able to cookie cutter a lot of things.
Yeah.
Connie Rentz is my right arm on it. I got Noah Gazenko in marketing helping me out too, and great folks in news. So it's a good team. And so when you do it that long, you know how it falls into place.
Well, people know where and how to donate coats, and in the last minute and 40 seconds here, I got to ask. For years, Mike Rhodes, Ed Buggs,
Yep.
John Mahaffey,
Yep.
Andrea Klesse,
Yep.
yourself sat at this very desk.
Margaret Lawhon.
Margaret Lawhon.
Yep.
Any funny story that you can tell on the air without us getting in trouble?
Let's do the Margaret Lawhon one.
Okay.
Margaret and I were always at this set, and I was always getting her laughing quite a
Yeah.
bit. Well, the late Reverend T.J. Jameson came in, and she was interviewing him, and they started off, and he turned and he said, "Well, Miss Mahan," just to this day.
You call her that?
Oh, I call her and say, "Miss Mahan, Patty, what are you doing?" Annie Klesse one time, she was showing people how this new thing called a leaf blower worked.
Really?
She brought this leaf blower out and she said, "Pat, what do you think of that?" I said, "Let me see." I cranked the thing out.
On air?
And Clay, the scripts were all on the desk. I'm blowing the scripts all over the place in her hair and whatnot and all that.
I got to get Ed Ball to go and find that video for
Oh,
me. So I
geez,
can-
yeah.
Well, listen, this is great.
Thank you.
It's always one of those examples of how we give back to the community.
Yeah.
And we talk so much about what's broken in Baton Rouge, but I always say more is right
Yeah.
than there is wrong.
Thank you so much. I'm going to get in and I'm putting myself in that slot as well.
On the wrong part or the right part? All right, the Family Justice Center will have someone here next week to talk about what they've got going on. We'll talk a little bit more about what's happening in Israel with Colonel Kuvion. And then the Gardeer Initiative, if you don't know about that, it's a fantastic program helping families in that part of our parish. And we'll talk with the force behind it next week. Y'all have a great, great weekend. Go Jags, go Tigers. See you next week.
You forgot to mention.